Hey guys, it's Maria. We're going to talk a little bit about sound production errors today. So I'm going to dive into articulation, phonological processes, and just barely glance on apraxia. I'm not going into motor speech disorders at this time. Now, for our kids, most children will have, as they're developing, a couple of sound errors here or there. They may substitute one sound for another. They may leave out a sound. They may add an extra sound here or there. They may do something which we call an approximation, which means they don't exactly have it correct, but they're really close to it. By the age of 4, most of our kids should have all of their basic sounds down pat, with the exception of R, L, Z, TH, the harder sounds. We don't expect them to have those till about 7. They should have their basic sounds down around 4 years old. An articulation disorder is the one you hear about the most. That's the one that's usually in a speech and language evaluation. When we talk about speech, that's the speech portion of it. It's sound production / articulation. An articulation disorder is when our kiddos are having a hard time producing a particular sound. Either they can't make it by itself in isolation, they can't make it in a word, they're having a hard time putting it into a sentence, but usually for the most part, they're having a hard time just producing that sound. They're having a hard time getting S correctly, getting L correctly, because they're having a hard time getting their muscles to move into that particular position. A phonological disorder is going to follow a pattern. Those kids don't just have a hard time making R. Usually if they're having a hard time with R, they're also having a hard time with L, and both of those are turning into W. They might have a hard time with their back sounds. That's the process of fronting. So they have a hard time saying K or G. So a cookie becomes a tutti. All the sounds that are produced in the back of your throat are now made, back of your mouth, not throat, the back of your mouth are going to come out of the front of your mouth. Usually when we can crack the code, we can kind of do like those little decipher things we did when we were a kid. Once we crack the code and we know what they're substituting, we're actually able to understand them, because in that pattern, they're very consistent in their pattern. They're very consistent in their errors, always being in the same positions or always being substituted by the same sound. Our most common phonological process errors are the process of fronting, which means putting all the sounds in the front of our mouth, gliding, which is going to be W for L, W for R, stopping, which means we take our air sounds like S, TH, F, the sounds that go th, and we make them a nice hard stop. Instead of being fun, it's going to become ton. Instead of being jump, it's going to become dump. We're making it a sound instead of just an air. Another very common one is final consonant deletion, and that's where our kiddos leave out the last letter of most words. Instead of being dog, it's a daw. Instead of being a house, it's a how. So we left out all the final sounds, which isn't a big deal in a single word situation, but when they're telling us a sentence and we're missing the last letter of every sound, it's really hard to understand what they're trying to tell us. Apraxia, on the other hand, doesn't have a pattern. Apraxia, for the most part, they might say the same word 2 or 3 times with different sound errors in different positions. These kids are seriously struggling just to get basic sounds from their brain to their mouth. Their sound errors are atypical. They're not the normal ones we see in phonological process. They're not leaving out the last syllable in the word. They're leaving out the first syllable in the word. They're doing the initial consonant deletion. They're backing sounds. So instead of being a titty-tat, they're using their back sounds, which is very uncommon to do. So with apraxia, we usually look at it when we start seeing odd errors. That's a whole different story. And like I said, I'm not going to dive too deep into apraxia because that goes into motor speech, and it's going to take a little bit longer to explain. The reason I'm going into these and I'm breaking them down is because I want people to understand an articulation disorder is pretty easy to fix. For the most part, once we know what sound they're having a hard time with, we need to retrain the mouth, lips, the tongue, the cheeks, the jaw, whatever it is. into the correct position to produce that sound. Now that we can produce that sound, we're going to try to put it in syllables. We're going to try to put it in words. Eventually, we'll try to put it into sentences. A phonological process, we have to fix the sound pattern. We have to teach that child to start producing sounds in the front of their mouth. We have to teach that child to start putting sounds at the end of the word. Usually they already are able to produce that sound. Now it's getting their brain to understand when it's making it in an error and where it needs to go. That's a little bit harder to fix than just a simple articulation disorder. Apraxia, on the other hand, is rewiring the whole circuit. We have to start from scratch. A lot of times with apraxia, our kiddos are making mostly vowel sounds. They have very limited consonants that they can produce. So we have to go back to basics and teach them all the consonants, how to make them, where they go. So I hope this explains it a little bit more. Please message me if you need to know anything different. Make a comment if you want me to explain anything further, or if you have any questions and you want me to talk about something different. All right, I hope you guys have a good day. Bye.